Uncharted 4 has the unenviable task of finishing the story of one of video games' most prolific heroes, Nathan Drake, but don't worry, it doesn't disappoint. Like Drake's previous adventures, he will come right to the very edge of his breaking point in the attempts to find the treasure of a lifetime. Only this time, he has more at stake than ever. Will he ride off into the sunset after one last job, or lose everything and everyone he cares about in the process of accomplishing his goal? This review won't answer those questions, those you'll have to find on your own. I will, however, give you an overview of Naughty Dog's latest game, and by the end of this review, I'm convinced you'll want to experience Nathan Drake's last adventure for yourself. Enjoy. Uncharted 4's opening sequence is a scene of what's to come, as we are jumped ahead to later events of the story, which place Nate and his brother Sam in the middle of a boat chase on a storming ocean. This scene doesn't last long, however, as it soon ends abruptly, giving us a chance to get a hold on the events that led our hero to this place. Hold on! Where our story really begins is with a very young Nathan Drake in an orphanage, which is where we are introduced for the first time to Sam Drake, Nate's older brother. This sequence is basically just a playable backstory, which gives you a chance to see the relationship between the two brothers. Don't get me wrong though, this sequence, while a tad slow moving, is a welcome piece of storytelling that helps us get acquainted with a new character to the series, Sam Drake.
You told me you'd stay out of trouble though.
Jumping ahead a few years, the next sequence places you in a foreign prison for reasons you'll soon find out, and also further sets up Nate and Sam's storyline. While this sequence does introduce you to the first bit of treasure hunting and combat in the game, it mostly serves as a plot device for the two brothers. I don't want to say anything else other than that tragedy strikes, and there's a reason Sam wasn't mentioned until now.
Have fun.
I will. Gracias.
The first few sequences jump you back and forth on the timeline to set up the plot, but it's not long before you get to see present-day Drake, whose life is now much more tame than it once was, as he works a normal job and goes home to his wife Elena. Nathan Drake is now living the American dream. It doesn't take long to see, however, that he misses his once exciting life, and as he looks through treasures collected during previous adventures, it's easy to tell. It's then that his long-lost brother shows up out of the blue with some horrible news.
Typical day in paradise.
Sam and Nate's reunion is short-lived, as Sam explains to Nate the trouble he's in, and how one last adventure for Nate is all that can save his newly reunited brother from certain death. That's about all the details I should give, as I don't want to spoil the story. However, I will say that it is fascinating to see how Nate juggles his new average life with a wife and a mortgage with his old adventuring ways and a brother who's been out of his life for a very long time. Suffice it to say, things go about as well as you'd imagine, though he doesn't seem to have much of a choice if he wants to keep his loved ones from harm's way.
Sam?
The game starts slow, but around Chapter 12 things pick up for the better. And though there are some pacing issues throughout the entirety of the game, these instances are mostly minor, and some are even welcome, as they are used as a plot device to further the storyline. Like its three predecessors, Uncharted 4's voice acting is once again superb. And though every actor has done extremely well, it's Nolan North's take on Nathan Drake that takes the cake. Throughout 4 games, it's not a stretch to say he has absolutely perfected this character. It's no mystery why he's one of the most sought-after voice actors in video games today, and his talent is on full display here.
Paradise awaits. He was recruiting.
This time around, puzzles have taken a slightly different form, the bulk of which are environmentally based and incorporated into the game's platforming function. There are some quote-unquote true puzzles that more resemble ones from the previous games, but sadly, they were few and far between and lacked any real difficulty.
Check it out, Sully, the clock still works.
As for the platforming itself, the addition of the rope, the python, and the ability to use either hand when reaching for a hold adds just enough nuance to breathe life into an element of gaming that has been around since the very beginning. This blending of the old with the new was enough to keep me engaged throughout in a system that I have admittedly tired of easily in the past. As a sucker for all things supernatural, I was a little disappointed to find that the supernatural elements that had been a major selling point for me in previous iterations was missing entirely. The thing is though, I was so swept up in the plot that I had almost finished the game before I even realized that this was the case, and just as quickly as the thought entered my mind, it was washed away by the engrossing and ever-thickening story. So as much as I would have liked to have some supernatural element to the story, it apparently wasn't necessary to provide an engrossing plotline this time around.
Sorry.
Without giving too much away about Drake's newest adversary, I will just say that while this villain may not be written with a ton of depth, this villain is just the type of person we all love to hate. And in that sense, I'd say that they fill their role very well.
Must have known you from last time.
The final battle with the villain was a slight letdown, though it was so poetically fitting, I'm obliged to give Naughty Dog a pass on this one. As far as in-game content, there is an absolutely staggering amount of playable options, as well as your more traditional character and concept art galleries, which come available after your first playthrough of the main story. But what really got my attention was the Add-Ons section of the bonus menu, which consists of skins, weapons, render modes, and gameplay modifiers. And though there are far too many bonuses to list in this review, a few standouts I'd like to mention are infinite ammo, bullet speed mode, and no gravity. All of the game's unlockables are available for purchase with an in-game currency simply listed as P, and as far as I know, microtransactions are not an option. The way I understand how the currency works is you are rewarded small amounts of currency for certain feats accomplished throughout the main story, with more difficult feats being rewarded large amounts and simpler feats being rewarded smaller amounts. For example, there is a larger set amount rewarded depending on which difficulty you complete the main story on, and smaller amounts rewarded for treasures found throughout said story. Though I don't know the exact figures, I can say that after completing the main story on hard difficulty and finding only 30 treasures, I was awarded 177p. And considering the most expensive unlockable, of which there is only one at this price, is 10, with all of the rest being listed at 1, 2, 3, and 5, 177p seems to actually be a lot, and more than enough to keep me engaged throughout another playthrough. Moving on to some of the game's mechanics, the screenshots you saw just moments ago are a product of Uncharted 4's screenshot function. This is a new function to the series, and it is definitely a welcome one. With a click of the joysticks, your game is paused and you're given full control over the game's camera, and just like that, you can begin to set up your shot. There's also a ton of options such as different filters and the ability to take whoever you want out of the shot, whether that be a buddy, a civilian, or even yourself, and this is all done on the fly. Once your shot is lined up, just take a screenshot the way you normally would using the PS4 screenshot function, and that's really all there is to it. Couldn't be simpler. This great new function isn't without its faults though, as all screenshots have to be accessed outside of the game in your PS4's menu, and I was also subject to a small amount of camera wonkiness that prevented me from getting a few of the shots that I had spent some time setting up. All in all, a great add-on to an already incredible game. The screenshot function isn't the only thing new to this time around though, as the combat system is sporting a fresh coat of paint, mostly due to Uncharted 4's newly revamped stealth system. While not completely redone from top to bottom, the added features are enough to make stealth, unlike previous games, a viable option and also a very fun one. The system features many of the genre's staples such as hiding in tall vegetation, of which there's plenty, sticking to cover like walls and waist-high ledges, silent kills, and the ability to mark targets to more easily keep track of your surroundings. This revamped system is another welcome addition, but it's hard not to compare this game to Naughty Dog's last critical darling, The Last of Us. Uncharted 4's stealth system, while viable, feels lacking when compared to The Last of Us' robust stealth gameplay. One of the unfortunate similarities between the two games is how your allies react while you're in stealth, which can be slightly immersion breaking. Just like Ellie in The Last of Us, your allies cannot give away your position or alert enemies, even if it seems they should be spotted. While I understand why this is the case, it is a little distracting watching an ally bump into an enemy only to have nothing happen. That said, though Uncharted's stealth system has its faults, it suits the game very well. The rest of Uncharted 4's combat feels very similar to previous iterations, though this isn't necessarily a bad thing, as I've always found the shooting mechanics to be fun, and with the few minor tweaks that have been made, shootouts feel better than ever. The shooting controls themselves feel much improved, as now there is a real sense of weight to Nate's actions. Whether he be firing a weapon, reloading, switching weapons, or throwing a punch, it all feels great, and the real-time physics that are responsible for a swaying strap on a rifle or a collapsing enemy further adds to the realism and overall feeling of these moments. Speaking of enemies, though the enemy roster, which hasn't changed since the previous game, consists of normal enemies, heavies, snipers, and ultra heavies, the improved AI that governs said enemies is a huge improvement this time around. And unlike most games, cover and suppressing fire actually work and influence the enemy's actions, which can be very helpful, but don't forget, these enemies are smarter in general and their actions won't usually work in your favor. Playing on hard difficulty, I was actually challenged during combat and died numerous times, which was refreshing in a current gaming landscape that seems desperate to hold your hand throughout the entirety of most AAA games. Another piece of the system that received a polishing was the destruction during action sequences. While in combat, sitting still is simply not an option, as your cover is very quickly blown to bits over and over again until the shooting stops. But it's a pretty sight, I assure you. This series is known for its set-piece moments that are reminiscent of what we see in Hollywood action movies, so when it came to these shootout situations, I, to a fault, made sure to go out of my way to make the sequences look and feel as cool as they possibly could. This resulted in many more deaths than I probably should have succumbed to, but hey, if I can't live out my action fantasies in an Uncharted game, then where will I? In that same vein, I know by now you've probably seen the car chase / crane scene numerous times in previews and trailers, but let me assure you, that won't matter one bit once you play it for yourself. I was literally on the edge of my seat for the entirety of the scene, and I was about as giddy as a schoolboy during his first encounter with a woman. I rank that sequence amongst the most memorable moments I have ever experienced in gaming. Truly wonderful. Last but certainly not least is the graphics. My God, the graphics. There's not much to say, but wow. While playing this game, it's easy to see just how dedicated Naughty Dog's developer team was to make this game with a meticulous attention to detail in every bit of every scenario, and boy did it pay off. Uncharted 4 sports, in almost every way, the best graphics I have ever seen. It's hard to explain just how gorgeous it is, and video clips just don't do it justice. It really is something that has to be experienced to fully appreciate. That being said, I can really only criticize a few aspects of Uncharted 4's graphical fidelity, one aspect of which is the shadow quality. Most of the time, it's great, but on a few occasions, there is definitely a temporal flicker, which when compared to the rest of the game's graphics, sticks out like a sore thumb. Temporal flicker is a form of aliasing, and though this game's anti-aliasing solution is almost perfect, this one area is an occasional minor issue. The cost of this great anti-aliasing solution is the cause of my only other graphical gripe, which is a few blurred edges and textures here and there in certain occasions. Of course, I should also mention that 30 frames per second is also a bummer, but on console games I've come to expect it, so it didn't bother me too much once I adjusted to it. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that Uncharted 4 invoked a childlike sense of wonder and excitement in me that few games have ever matched. It's that type of game. This doesn't take away from other games, because not every game is meant to invoke the feelings that this game does. It's just that the Uncharted games hold a very special place in the pantheon of video game history, and for the niche it holds, Uncharted 4 is truly the undisputed king. Now, I don't think the perfect game exists, but this is a perfect gaming experience. 10 out of 10. So hey everyone, thanks for watching my video review. I know it may be a little rough around the edges, but this is literally the first video I've ever made, so I promise I'll get better with practice. But if you liked it and you want more reviews like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe. And check the description if you're interested in winning a $50 Steam or console card of your choice. Catch you on the next one.